One time for the one time, two time for the two time. You are tapped back in with Northstar Politics, pushing
Come
political
on.
imagination. Welcome home, stars. Them, of course, you're with myself, Noah East 9 on each and every platform. The Myland Malcolm X. We didn't land on Bethnal Green. Bethnal Green landed on us. Different gravy, never lazy, aka Slimatar Herbertov. And I am joined virtually by the Enfield Eric Williams,
Come on
Sean
now.
Ramiz on each and every platform. We call him the DreamWorks Moses, set my people them free. And we are in different parts of the world right now. Where are you at, Sean?
We're snowed in. I didn't even want to do my ad libs because I don't even know if the audio is going to cut you out or anything like that because we're new
It
to
could get
this.
crazy.
True to this though. Might be new to this, but we're true to this.
Yeah, of course. Stars, then we wouldn't leave you. Sean's out in
Canada. So you know what? Yeah, you can't actually call me the Enfield Eric Williams anymore. I've leveled up. I'm
what's it gonna be?
The Canadian CLR James. That's what I'm
Nah,
going for.
what about the Toronto Kwame Toure?
No, but surely it's got to be a better alliteration than that. But yeah, I'll take it though.
All right, there we go. And me, I've just come back from a failed holiday, which we'll get into. But I'm in London. But just so that we could keep you updated throughout the winter season, we thought we'd just brand this little December snowed in with the boys. It'll be a bit more personal this time, more for the core audience, the real stars, them. But we'll be keeping you guys updated.
You know what's interesting? I just realized I can't even call myself a CLR James or Kwame Ture because I'm not a Marxist, famously.
Famously not a Marxist.
Not a Marxist.
No, that even brings us to the a little bit of a discussion. Some of our clips been going flying off the shelves
I
recently.
know, man, it's been crazy. But you
It's
know what it
interesting
is?
the ones that catch.
It is, but then I think for so long, one of the kind of defining characteristics of the left or the woke is that you're not allowed to disagree, and it becomes very kind of tribal and it becomes quite a toxic place to actually have those disagreements. But I'm actually quite happy that with Northstar, we've taken it there to some very like interesting conversations and some very personal conversations, and also ones that people might heavily disagree with, but it's always been done quite respectfully. So I
No,
actually
of
think
course.
I'm
And
grateful for
we're
that.
people who think that discourse, debate, that sort of stuff is actually useful for developing ideas and developing community. So when we see, there's interesting because sometimes we had a bit of a critique of Zara Sultana, and now we love what Zara Sultana's up to right now, supporting the hunger strike, which we'll get onto later in the episode. But the two things aren't mutually exclusive at all. And it's that kind of camaraderie, that's real camaraderie, to be able to critique where critique is necessary, but then support also where support is necessary.
And also, I think as we sit, on these kind of mics in front of people with this highly sort of produced setup, which obviously
Not this week.
we don't have right now. I think it's important just to kind of renew our intentions and let people know we're actually just trying to work things out in real time. Of course, we've been grateful and blessed to have a great education, great life experiences, and that's sort of formed our worldview. But ultimately, what we say now can definitely change in the next 5 years, 2 years, one
Okay,
year.
Keir Starmer.
But it's real though, because this life
No,
is
it
all
is
about
true.
learning and changing your opinions, right? Well,
Of
just
course,
trying
when
to
it's done with
ascertain
sincerity.
truth. Yeah, exactly.
And even for the people that are tapped in with us this winter, we are going to get a bit more into the North Star backstory.
Okay.
The stories of Noah and Sean. The echo chamber this week is going to be more discursive and a bit more of a chit chat. And over the next few weeks, we're even going to be doing a question and answer session like some real YouTubers.
Let's hope. And also, just to let people know, this is just the down season right now. But if you wait to see who we have lined up for the first episode back, I won't say anymore.
We've
I won't
got
say
big
anymore.
things coming in 2026. Sean, chat to me. How is the rest and realization out in the six?
No, it's good, man. So I think a classic experience for any sort of immigrant kid, ethnic kid, is that they just go home in the holidays and spend time with the aunties them. And let me tell you guys something, I'm getting pampered, boy. I've
Come
got
on.
enough roti, doubles, curry goat, all the different types of foods, yeah, that I'm just getting served, and I'm getting served like a king. So it's been
Big
really
drip.
good. And the
Did you find
people
time to watch the episode last week?
yeah, of course. Oh, come on now. Of
Come on.
course, I had time to watch the episode. I've been obviously trying to do a little bit of a dopamine detox because inspired by my great friend Noah over here. I've sort of been microdosing. He kind of compared it to like, what is it? Just lining your
Lining your
with
gums
crack
with the
or something.
cocaine. And
But
by the way, me and Sean do not advocate for drugs at all.
no,
But just so
obviously,
we've
I'm
heard,
Muslim, so.
just watch bare films, innit?
And
Well, how do you think Basayo did? Streets were loving the episode.
But like, do you know what it is? You have a bit of ego in these seats, and you want to make sure that the person who sits in your seat think is as good or even better than you. And obviously, she's been doing this for a long time. So you know what? She's an OG. So it was actually great just to see her, um, yeah, I guess sit in that seat with pride and talk her talk. I think she landed with that. Let me land. I wish I was there.
with
I
a
would have been
Nigel
clapping
Farage
her.
take.
Bro, I've been saying for a long time that people need to feel pain before things get good. Yeah, we need to
Fairs.
feel a bit of suffering before things get good. So yeah, I think she was great, and hopefully we can get her back on in the new year, and I can be
No,
there for
definitely. I
sure.
mean, for the stars them at home, the people that you've seen come on to co-host, this is family. These are friends of the star at this point. That they'll be back. They'll be back when they need to come and talk about something else. There's always a home for them there. And next year, not only will we be having big guests on, but also more and more community building with those
That
co-hosts. So
that's what I'm saying.
literally get in
What?
contact with other people you want to see on here, people you want to have featured on here. We've got a brilliant interview coming today for you guys around the hunger strikes for Palestine. But anything else we need to recap? I think. Oh, as in on my end, been a crazy time. Like stars them, yeah. I just fumbled. I just flopped. So like my mum, she I won't say how old she is, and it's a young woman, but her birthday was recently, and I bought her a holiday for me and her to go to Madeira because it was kind of like good for both of us, like sun for her, and then I love hiking. So cool. I flew out on the Thursday to Madeira. Her flight's coming on the Friday. Like they've got 30 minutes away from Madeira, and I don't know if you know, but like Madeira is famously hard to land. Like the plane, so 30 minutes out, they just told her like we're turning back. So they've taken her back to London, and then they're saying, yeah, no flights are going to be going out for the whole weekend because it's just stormy. So I'm thinking, I'm on the phone to her thinking, rah, this is so peak. Like I paid all this money for my mum's
That's quite
birthday
rough.
holiday. It's
Yeah.
brutal. But then all the things I'd booked to do as well just got cancelled.
So did you
Like,
do anything fulfilling in this holiday then?
as in, it was fulfilling in the sense of it was like enforced just meditative mode. Like I didn't get to go hiking or anything like that, but I was just reading, writing, walking, watching football. I watched films for the first time in age. I watched 3 films.
I know it's been a long time since I watched a film, to be honest.
Bro, as in I watched The Prestige, which is old, like from 2006. Is about like magicians, but it's
Okay.
interesting because a rapper that I like, Jay Electronica,
Oh, okay.
he borrows from that film quite a lot. I watched the new Knives Out. I know a lot of the stars then probably movie snobs in it, but like it's bad. It's bad like
That
film,
one's like a dead film I've heard though.
but I like them. I like them. It's like a murder
Oh.
mystery. And then I watched the Frankenstein. I like Guillermo del Toro, the Frankenstein on Netflix.
I wonder if anyone else like who part of the Stardom can actually relate to this. But when I watch films, I actually don't have like good opinions after. Like I really don't know how people come away and think, wow, and then they can just write such like a detailed review and get into the nitty gritty of it. For me, it's just how the film makes me feel. So I'll just watch it and be like, okay, that was a cool film, and then that's it.
That's interesting because obviously not to gas your team, but you're quite a thoughtful guy. But I guess it's just different media, like
Yeah,
connect
I
with different
guess.
people. Just like
Yeah,
for me, like music, big time. I have loads of thoughts. Maybe films, not as many.
I feel so fickle when it comes to films, but that's good though.
Yeah.
I'm glad you rested.
No, it's been good. But now we're back and getting stuff prepped for 2026. This week on Northstar the Politics Show, we've got some big stories. So we will be talking to an activist who's representing the people that are striking, hunger striking for Palestine, which is our headline story. We're then going to be talking about the Bondi Beach shooting, catastrophic event that happened in Sydney over the past few days. We'll also be talking a little bit about the new US national security strategy that was published last week, which is kind of a bit pessimistic for those of us in Europe, especially those in the EU. And then also the NHS strikes. So people might have seen in the news where there'll be doctor strikes going on from the 17th to the 22nd of December. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And then the second part of the show, we're going to get into an echo chamber where me and Sean give a bit of background on our goals and also our opinions on the current state of political commentary and where we can take that. So let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So welcome back to the State of Play. And if you're new here, this is basically where we break down some of the hottest topics in current affairs this week and around this time. So the first story that we're bringing is that, and it's actually something that's been quite suppressed and ignored by mainstream media and main politicians, in particular David Lammy. And that is that we are witnessing one of the largest hunger strikes in UK history by political prisoners. So before we bring in Nida to give a little breakdown, who's our guest interview today, I'm just going to give a bit of a summary around the kind of incidents and how we've come to this moment. So the Filton 24 refers to a group of UK pro-Palestine activists arrested in August 2024, in which Palestine Action activists broke into and damaged an Elbit Systems armed facility in Filton near Bristol. They are charged with offences including aggravated burglary, criminal damage, and violent disorder, and have actually been held on remand, right? So in pre-trial detention for over a year, longer than the usual custody limit. So these prisoners are unconvicted. And it gets complicated because in July 2025, the UK government prescribed, so therefore banned Palestine Action as a terrorist organization under the Terrorism Act of 2000, which means that anyone who basically supports the group or is a member of the group can now be treated as a terrorist offense and carries significant criminal penalties. And so the defendants in those cases who are part of the Filton 24, they haven't been charged with terrorism offenses per se, but because the police initially used terrorism powers to detain them, i.e., extended custody without charge, and because the organization are now linked to a prescribed terrorist group, in practice, they've been treated with heightened security measures and harder procedures than typical criminal suspects, which is basically what the injustice of all of this really centers on. And then as of December 2025, eight of the Filton 24 are undertaking a hunger strike. So some of these strikers have been striking for around 40 days. And so this is the largest coordinated action in the UK in decades of this type. And it's really the only way they have left to protest their detention conditions and to demand bail and fair treatment. And many of them are approaching critical condition. So we have one of the best friends of one of the hunger strikers coming on now to give her thoughts, to give a more serious breakdown, a more detailed breakdown, and yeah, tell us exactly how we can all get involved and make sure that we can push the campaign to support these hunger strikers. So thank you so much, Nida, for joining us today. It'll just be great to start off with just understanding your involvement with the hunger strikers, and yeah, a little bit of a summary of how we've got to this situation now.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I attended sixth form with Amu, and I've been friends with Amu for years, who is one of the hunger strikers. And today is day 46 of their hunger strike. Since they were arrested in June with links to the RAF Bryce Norton direct action, which was essentially kind of, yeah, I guess coordinated
The
by
Palestine
a
action stuff, right?
Exactly,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Some like paint thrown on two spy planes that were used, like around 600 plus times to commit massacres in Palestine and in Gaza. And so for 14 days for their arrest, they kind of just disappeared. And because we're so close that it was insane that the state, because if they slap like terrorism on anything, they can they can essentially make someone disappear from your life for 2 weeks without any like phone call or anything like that. So that's kind of the enforced disappearance part. And then since then, I've been kind of visiting them in prison. And my kind of connection to this isn't just with Amu, it is also partly because I am a human being and we have gone through 2 years of living through an ongoing genocide with no full arms embargo, which is just unprecedented and cruel. So yeah, and then the hunger strike began, 47 days ago on Balfour Day on the 2nd of November.
Mhm.
This was announced by a collective called Prisoners for Palestine, which kind of yeah, which is a collective that stands for all prisoners imprisoned for the Palestinian liberation, and like mostly all of them get kind of like some level of like terrorism charges, which they weaponize kind of the ambiguity of it
Sure.
to not yeah.
And talk to me about just the sequence of events that led up to the decision for the prisoners to actually go on hunger strike. What are some of the kind of injustices that they were facing?
Yeah, it's multitudes. There are multitudes, and there are multitudes and like layers of things and reasons why this hunger strike has began. And the bottom line is that if politics could stop a genocide, there wouldn't be a genocide. Politics can't stop a genocide because there just wouldn't be one. And so there has to be a level of like resistance and movement that occurs to oppose a genocide, to oppose injustice, and to oppose repression of protest, which is what my friends are facing. They have tried all legal avenues. In the beginning of Amu's, like prison experience, we had to do phone blockades in prison, and their prison kind of conditions got way worse after the prescription of Palestine action, and all of them were arrested before it. And so we have gone, before the hunger strike, we have gone from calling the prison and doing phone blockades to get Kessa moved from like an induction wing, to get T her kind of library job back, from like these marginal changes and violation of their human rights in prison, to now having Zara Sultana be outside the prison telling the prison to call an ambulance. And that is why we had to escalate to this level, because David Lammy, like, my friends are willing to expose you, and we are exposing you. It is cruel what you have done. And yeah.
Yeah, and just to be a bit clearer then, so the experience of like people like Kessa, Amu, and the other hunger strikers, then I've seen things online about how they've been denied access to medical care, their communications with their like lawyers and families has been censored. So as someone who's obviously like, I guess one of the closest representatives for Amu, what's that kind of communication been like with them?
And also, could I add on to that as well, Nida? Is it has become worse because of the prescription of Palestine Action as a terrorist group. They've now been able to leverage some of the legislation around terrorism to deprive the prisoners.
Yes, I think we have to be a bit careful. I mean, I want to be careful with the framing of all of this, because no one's prison conditions are like good. Like prisons in itself are just like a symptom of like austerity, especially the ones that are on remand. And if we want to look at prison conditions, the Palestinian prisoners, they have like way worse prison conditions. But two things can be true. And whilst that is true, also another truth is that the prison conditions of my friends have gotten worse since the prescription, and the prison conditions of I don't know, of people that are in there for Palestinian liberation especially are very censored, and they use terror legislation to do that. And it's, like, I was visiting Amu yesterday in prison with John McDonnell, and yeah, there was like this point that came up that really stuck with me. And it was that, and Amu was talking to John about their prison conditions, and it was that I think what like all of the screws and the justice system do are they wait for like a law to come in so that they can kind of drop their humanity further and like violate further. Like, the thing that stops them is the law from violating human rights. And so when some like terror legislation and prescription comes in, it just gives them more way to take that away.
And just to be clear, what are the demands from the hunger strikers?
Yes, of course. So the demands are an end to censorship, which means you need to stop censoring conversations, holding back books, censoring any kind of like Palestinian solidarity within prison, like free association, all the prisoners, like all the prisoners, the 33 prisoners that are incarcerated can be on the same landing or can be in the same prison. And then it's right to fair trial. So there are a lot of documents between Elbit Systems and the government that would prove like the Fulton case. They're all redacted documents, and we have a right to fair trial. We have a right to like fair trial with a jury. And then it's de-prescription of Palestine action, which encompasses kind of the dropping of the terror legislation charges of my friends. And then it is also immediate bail, because they, like, some of them, especially Kessa, they've been in prison for a year, and the remand limit for being in prison is 6 months. And that 6 months is only ever surpassed if someone has like committed like insane level of like criminal activity, and that isn't the case here. And the fifth one is to shut Elbit Systems down, which is Israel's largest weapons manufacturer, and it has an increase of it's benefited, our taxes pay for it. They have profits of 2 billion or something off a genocide, and it helps apparently the UK economy. It's ridiculous, and we want to shut it down.
And one thing that we always talk about on Northstar Politics is having or holding certain figures to account, and a lot of the attention has been on David Lammy and his response to this. So what
The Justice Secretary.
Yeah, the Justice Secretary of this country. So what's really been happening there? Has he really even responded to any of this?
Yeah, so so I think like it was around 25th November or something that John McDonnell tabled an early day motion, 2386. And yeah, they've been kind of lobbying loads of MPs, and I think it's got around like 47 to 50 signatures of MPs. John McDonnell, Jeremy Corbyn have been writing to David Lammy, and Jeremy Corbyn is Amu's MP. And he's been kind of ignoring it. We intercepted him at a Christmas market as well, and he pretended not to know anything about it. And then since then, he has, after Jeremy Corbyn brought it up in Parliament and Lindsay Hoyle called it unacceptable that he hasn't responded. He responded, and it was just a big bluff of just like prison laws. And in there, he said that it's not appropriate for us to meet, so he rejected meeting them.
Wow.
A couple of things on that. Obviously reprehensible the way David Lammy is conducting himself, considering there's a man who will happily fly out to West Asia to shake hands with Benjamin Netanyahu, but not meet with these noble heroes. But also, really big shout out to the MPs who are taking action, Zara Sultana there, John McDonnell and the like. For those at home who, obviously, maybe we've got MPs listening, but for those at home listening who aren't MPs, what can we do as just your average citizen to support the hunger strikers?
Yeah, I think please keep turning up to demos. We want to show like mass movement. Please keep sharing things about. I think there's like a big education piece that we want to pass through the campaign about what Elbit is doing, about the complicity of UK. We can't stop talking about it because it is a fake ceasefire. Keep doing that. Write to your MPs and get them to sign the early day motion. Write to your MPs and get them to speak up about meeting with David Lammy. We need to push from kind of the backbenchers in Parliament for this to be passed. And your councillors can also get you, appointments with the caseworker of your MP, and the councillors can also kind of show and pledge support for Palestine Action hunger strikers.
It's also important for people to remember how sort of multifaceted this problem is, and why even if perhaps you don't see yourself as someone who's vulnerable to being persecuted for your support for Palestine, maybe you're not particularly fervent like the hunger strikers are, this is a kind of criminalization of free speech, of public speech, that will impact people in different ways long term. If we remember what the Palestine Action activists are convicted of doing, or what was prescribed as a terrorist action, was what I would consider literally civil disobedience or damage to private property.
Throwing paint on a plane.
Precisely, and cool, it was criminal, and that's fine. But for my understanding, it's not terrorism, and it seems that the British state is leveraging this notion of terrorism to support their own political goals, which is important for us as people in general.
Yeah, I think also to add to that, if you think about the damage it does to mostly working class Muslim activists that stand up for Palestine and give them the label of terrorists over like climate change activists. When you even think about that, I think the whole hunger strike has been symbolic of what we have gone through as a country since October 7th, which is that we have gone from like 500k people every weekend out. We've gone to mass arrests of, like DOJ campaigns for like, challenging the prescription of Palestine Action. And there's just a level of like immobility in Parliament, any acknowledgement from it. And I think when politics fails, you have to kind of escalate in other ways, which is like what is happening right now. And it's just like this 46 days of whatever has occurred the past 2 years. And yeah.
Cool. Well, listen, thank you so much, Nida, for giving us your gems of wisdom and telling us how to actually do something about this. Just leave your username and handles one more time, just so people can actually know where to go and find more information around different pages. So I know Prisoners for Palestine is one. Is there any other page?
Yeah, I think they can. Yeah, they should follow Prisoners and then number 4 and then for Palestine, and then they can also follow Cage International, Canary. I think Novara Media is covering us a lot. You can also follow me if you want to like have any kind of updates about Amu. My username is Jida Nafri. It's annoyingly instead of Nida Jaffrey, but yeah.
It's fine. We'll leave all that in the description below. But thank you so much, Nida.
Thanks so
No
much, Nida.
worries. Thanks. Bye.
Hunger strikes in the UK, all of them are like under 30. And of course, David Lammy's literally ignoring it. Honestly,
It's
when you
inspiring.
hear,
It's inspiring to see that level of fortitude, though.
no, 100%, it's definitely inspiring, but it's really shows all of us that we can be doing more. And also, I did even mention in the interview, like I've actually interviewed Kessa before, the hunger striker who's in like the most sort of critical condition. And honestly, the reason why I sat down with her and interviewed, like gave an extra interview for her, is because she's honestly so inspiring in real life. And so, yeah, I just wish them the best, to be honest.
No, definitely, and we'll keep everyone abreast of that topic as it develops. But we wish and hope, and we'll be active as far as we can to make sure the best outcome happens for the hunger strikers. Our second story of the day is heavy. Bit of a heavy week, but heavy week. So, as people will know, there was a shooting on Bondi Beach in Australia on the 14th of December, a terrorist attack that occurred during a Hanukkah celebration on the first day of Hanukkah, where 15 people were killed and 40 were injured. People have probably seen a lot of the footage from this. A father and son duo, Sajid and Naveed Akram, carried out the shooting using licensed firearms. So there is some level of licensing for firearms in Australia, especially recently, and these were legal firearms. Sajid ended up being killed by police at the scene, while Naveed was hospitalized later and charged with 59 offenses, including murder and terrorism. At this point in time, there is suspicion that the motivation was religiously inspired fanaticism or terrorism linked to extremist ideology, including ISIS symbols and manifestos being found in the car of the father and son. The response to the attack has been worldwide. Australia government naturally has condemned and publicly addressed the attack. The Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu has suggested that Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia, is somewhat culpable for this in him having recognised Palestine as a state. And around the world, we've seen premiers outpour with support for Australia. Vigils and tributes around the world. And the debate has been sort of revived on the gun law reform, but also how this radicalisation is linked to the Palestine movement. So there has been, unfortunately, but as we might expect, that weaponization, that politicization of the Palestine activism. So people have been suggesting that the gunmen were emboldened by these ideas of globalize the intifada, or from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and these sorts of notions. So that has been animated again in the public consciousness. But the first thing that me and Sean would definitely like to say is it is atrocious and horrific, and our prayers and thoughts are with the members of the community, the Jewish community especially, who were affected by this at the time. We also think it's quite abhorrent the way this has been politicized so quickly. But unfortunately, this is the state of play that we exist within.
Yeah, I also actually want to say that the Muslim community in response did something quite interesting and something fairly controversial, and that is the mosques in the area all basically agreed on not to give Islamic burial rights to both Naveed and the father. I think Naveed's actually alive, because they're rejecting the notion that anyone who could commit these acts are truly Muslim. Now, for whatever reason, I think, that it can be controversial because obviously, for a multitude of reasons, but I'm probably in broadly agreement with that, to be honest. I think it's a bit, look, when these acts happen, there's no one more upset and hurt by it than many of the Muslim community. And I mean, I guess the silver lining in it all, if you can even call it that, is the fact that we saw the bravery of one particular individual actually disarm one of the attackers, and that man was also Muslim. And so you get quite an interesting dichotomy here where, of course, there is a problem with the rise of some sort of fanaticism, and the tenuous link to Palestine activism is just laughable, to be honest. And I'm sure we'll dig a bit deeper into that. But at the same time, it's good to know that there's some people in this world that exist that actually have the principle and the kind of moral courage to step up and actually, save people.
No, I agree. And I think as well, obviously, this is not a topic that we have a broad conversation to have on because it is quite cut and dry and it's atrocity. Sure. But I think people should resist the impulse to use this as a platform for polarization. So in the same way on the podcast, we've discussed before how, members of the community who are pro-Palestine should resist any sort of impulse or drive to coalesce Jewish identity with Israeli identity or tar the Jewish spirit with that of the Israeli actions. Similarly, we should resist any polarization or any sort of media that's pushing us to try and align people that are supporting an end to a genocide in Palestine with people that are committing heinous acts of terrorism. And, like we discussed, we had topics about Islamic terrorism before, where we've said like it's really important for people to be able to detach those two things. Otherwise, you end up sort of fermenting that hate.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the radicalization and radicalizing effects isn't basically spurred by a bunch of people shouting globalize the intifada on the streets or protesting a genocide, but rather I think if someone was truly radical, let's imagine there was a fanatic, and now what they're seeing day in, day out for the last 2 years is the sort of eradication or obliteration of a people. To me, I think that's only going to radicalize people even further. And so, Benjamin Netanyahu having the sort of audacity to come on sort of airways and trying to use this horrific tragedy for his own political gain is I think rather hypocritical, because a lot of his own actions have probably fed into the increasing radicalization of a lot of people across the world.
Yeah. Our next story is one that it's quite localized and it will affect people in the UK. So as many people will know, starting today on the 17th of December and for 5 days, resident doctors in England are beginning a strike action after rejecting the government's latest offer to resolve the long-running dispute over pay and jobs. This is reported by The Guardian. The British Medical Association and the Health Secretary Wes Streeting, they met on Tuesday in a final attempt to reach an agreement but failed to do so. It means that from 7 a.m. today, on the day of recording, they will begin a strike, continuing all the way till 7 a.m. on Monday of the 22nd. The latest offer from the government would have increased the number of training places to enable early career doctors to start training in their chosen medical speciality, but it didn't increase their pay for the current financial year. Resident doctors, who make up about half of all NHS doctors, overwhelmingly rejected the offer in a BMA survey last week, with 83% voting against it on a 65% turnout. The industrial action will be the 14th strike that resident doctors have staged since March 2023. I think that the media coverage around this, sorry to just jump straight in, but the thing that's been on my mind, the media coverage around this has been entirely in keeping with what Northstar has predicted for the past sort of 10 weeks of us being around. Mm-hmm. I'll remind people again, they probably heard this ringing in their ears, that I always talk about real terms. And a big thing that the BMA is leveraging is that in real terms, doctors have seen what people call pay erosion. So as inflation carries on year, if inflation since 2008 has been like 50%, let's say, then a 40% increase in your pay is concurrent with a 10% decrease in your real terms pay. There's been a 10% erosion. And so when you see people like Wes Streeting, who I am sick to the back teeth of as the health secretary, and others basically go on media or put out media briefings where they say, and they essentially try and pit people against doctors by saying, oh, look, they've got a 26% pay rise already. Why do they want anything more? Well, one, doctors are aware of the fact that the 26% pay rise is still concurrent with a pay erosion, but also they're kind of planning for the fact that we're not going to get a pay rise for probably the next 10 years. So how am I going to protect myself against that real terms erosion? The second thing, to get into a bit more economics nerdy stuff here, is there is two major measures of inflation that are used within British economics. You have CPI. Sean, let's test your PPE degree here. What's
the
CPI?
Consumer Price Index.
Come on. And then you've got RPI.
Retail Price Index.
Yeah. Okay. Full marks here. Could you tell me what the difference is?
Basically, when I'm gonna just open up ChatGPT. ChatGPT is gonna.
I'll tell you that. Don't worry. So the big difference is the retail price index also includes measures for mortgage payments and housing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So you can imagine that the RPI is significantly going to be above CPI, but also the RPI is actually just more realistic in terms of how inflation impacts people's lives.
Yeah.
So what doctors are looking to do is have their pay scales matched against RPI and using that as the relevant measure of how much their pay has been eroded, which just makes sense. Like doctors are going to be people that are paying rent, they're going to be buying homes, they're going to be paying for their mortgage. So if their mortgage is increased by a certain amount, that should be factored into their pay erosion or their pay increase. Whereas the government is saying, blah, blah, CPI, this, that, and the third. And, maybe they're just predicting the fact that in the future, no one will be able to own a home. So maybe it will be a more accurate measure. But currently, RPI is a far more important measure, especially when we consider that student debt for doctors which obviously is famously greater than the average person because they spend more time at university, is indexed against RPI.
Yeah.
So by all means, this is the correct way of measuring it. Outside of the pay stuff, there's also contestation around helping doctors get into consultancy schemes, so to get to that final stage of seniority within the doctoring profession, and then also provisions for more doctors to support the NHS.
Yep.
Sean, thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to come in and say that so one quick economic point as well is that a lot of we spoke about this once upon a time in our debate on immigration with the Discourse Collective back in the day, and that is in a lot of the measuring and the stats that come out around when government put in policy to perhaps raise wages, etc. They do a cost benefit analysis, but in these cost benefit analyses, it tends to be quite static because it's really hard to dynamically model the actual kind of second order or third order effects of raising a wage. I want my doctors to be paid well. I think like shock horror, I think that these doctors probably have the most important jobs to our national economy because health is so important for stability and just the long-term overall health of our society. So there's that. But then also I think that if we kind of recenter it on the doctor experience, like most people are probably so detached from what doctors actually have to go through. Like this is not some 9 to 5 where you can like work from home 2 days a week. Doctors are in there from literally midnight to I mean from midnight to midnight sometimes. Like the
even being on call when they're off work but on call.
That's what I mean. And like if you actually we have a lot of like young friends who have just become doctors, and it's horrible. Like they are literally, if you calculate their kind of wage per hour, right? Because they're obviously getting over contracted as well. I'm not even surprised if it drops below the minimum wage. Like this is we are treating our most important aspect of our labor force in such a derogatory manner.
It's insane. Speaking of derogatory manner, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer has come out and said that the doctors striking are utterly irresponsible. And that's a secondary point I want to touch on, is when you see a lot of the discourse around this is like, basically villainising doctors who have taken the Hippocratic Oath and literally here to serve people, villainising doctors and basically saying, people are going to die. Like, why are you doing this? Well, no, why are we always doing that? Let's flip that on the government. Because famously, can I quote someone here? The power to stop these strikes lies squarely with the government. Who said that?
Who did? You tell me.
Where's Streeting in 2022?
Oh, here we go. Labour hypocrites.
Precisely. What do you call it? What was my phrase for them back in the day? The Jekyll and Hyde generation of Labour. We're seeing it again. And so there's this idea in economics of elasticity, and where the burden for a certain cost will fall if it could be split. So sometimes you'll see maybe there's like an upstream price increase in like the oil price. So like commodities will increase in their price of production. And if consumers are really, really responsive to a change in price and they'll stop buying, then it's hard for that to be passed on to consumers, and suppliers will have to eat that price increase, or vice versa. And in this instance, when we're seeing a need for an increase in doctors' pay, or like a increase in the cost for providing doctors, it's basically who's going to have to bite that bullet? Either the doctors themselves, basically being paid less for more effort, or the government by having to pay the doctors more. And all of this media heft being put behind villainising the doctors is designed precisely to make it harder for doctors to maintain their stance. When in fact, if doctors are so important, if they're so irresponsible, all of those critiques lie squarely with the government. If it's irresponsible to be having doctors out of work and on picket lines during the coldest months of the year when flu's at an all-time high, that irresponsibility lies squarely with the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary. If it is damaging, it is the Health Secretary doing the damage. Because as Wes Streeting said in 2022, the power to stop these strikes lies squarely with the government. And I just think that media narrative is something we need to fight against all the time.
But I think it's also indicative of this idea in British culture that things seem to be a race to the bottom, that it's sort of shameful that these these doctors, actually want a higher wage that allows them to just live a good life. Because ultimately, like we said before, it's arguably the most important role one could have.
And when we're taking it back to the uni days, because we're getting into a bit more weird economics and academic economics, but cool. So within like the strategy game that is capitalism, a big part here in like what the media trying, the narrative that a lot of mainstream media and especially the government trying to play is pitting people against one another to prevent different pockets of people coordinating. So saying, oh, but they've already been accepted a 20 something percent pay increase. Why do they need any more? And so you should be reading that as someone who maybe hasn't seen a pay increase in the last 5 years and thinking, yeah, the doctors, you're just being greedy. When in fact, I saw Michael Walker of Novara Media, big shout out to Michael Walker, big shout out to Novara Media, talking about this on their show yesterday, where he was actually leveraging a bit of a weak critique against doctors, saying it does seem a bit like you're doing a bit too much, and maybe characterizing doctors as people from middle class backgrounds who are a bit entitled to wanting more, whereas nurses weren't able to get as much of a pay increase. And I think, Michael, we need to just steer clear of that kind of discussion because it's all about coordination and collaboration. So we should be coordinating around increases for everyone and supporting this, but then also going back and saying, yeah, nurses, you should be able to have a stronger union and get more pay. Instead of saying, oh, well, maybe relative to nurses, why do you deserve so much more? I just think that's not productive.
Yeah, and also I think like when you do fall into that trap, again, I think people really have no clue how like grueling it is to be a doctor, to be on the wards, to be in your scrubs day in, day out, especially when it comes from someone like Michael Walker, whose like main job is literally just talking to a camera. Which
As opposed
honestly,
to us?
well, we have other jobs
We
outside of
work,
this.
to be fair,
Maybe
yeah.
one day we can be like Michael Walker, but yeah, I think that's that, to be honest.
No, it's unfortunate the way that doctors, and it's like the government. You are literally, especially the statistically, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are the most unpopular prime minister and chancellor pairing in history. Yet you think you have like the political capital or cultural capital to go against doctors. These are bankers,
but I don't think they do think that deep down though. I think it's just like this idea that the class. Our politics is being, co-opted by corporate interests, and therefore it means that their sort of payoff matrix of how can I really get elected next election just banks on them again, like you said, being subservient to bankers.
And one thing I would encourage people to be wary about is Wes Streeting is someone who for a long time has had his eye on privatising the NHS in part or in full. And I'm worried to what extent he might leverage this tension or this conflict, this rift to incorporate some level of private insurance or social insurance contract to pay off part of doctors' wages and then let that be the door opening to private influence in public healthcare.
You know what? Can I shout out someone that I think people should follow to actually learn a bit more about the doctors, etc. There's a really great guy and he's a great activist. His name's Dr. Ayo Khalil. So you can find his Instagram just like that. We'll put it in the description as well. And it's really illuminating hearing from his perspective just how sort of tough it is to be a doctor, but then also the importance of actually, or the political kind of clarity around what they're actually campaigning for. And I think, yeah, hopefully in the new year, I definitely want to get more doctors on and people who are part of like, these campaigns around the NHS to speak to them. Because I think to most people and in most people's consciousness, it is a bit of like a blur what really is going on in the NHS. And I think that would be important that we can do. I
agree. Our final state of play story, a brief one for today, is regarding the US national security strategy that was published last week. You've got a bit to say about this already.
I've got a bit to say, yes. So they've published a national security strategy which claims that Europe risks becoming unrecognizable within 20 years.
They're talking about us, They're talking about me and you.
Yeah, talking about me and you. Exactly, word. Talking about civilizational erasure. So the narrative is that Europe is portrayed as facing long-term decline driven by mass migration, low birth rates, loss of national identity, and weakened sovereignty. And of course, they're blaming the immigrants for that somehow. And some European states are therefore questioned about whether or not they can retain a sufficient economic and military strength to actually remain reliable US allies. So the US supports the patriotic European parties, which code word is basically for the anti-immigrant ones, and frames them as restoring confidence, identity, and sovereignty. But overall, it's described as basically lacking self-confidence in dealing with Russia, requiring obviously the US involvement to manage and end the Ukraine war. So the document has a repeated emphasis on migration, decline in birth rates, loss of identity, civilizational erasure, which basically just mirrors the white replacement theory or the narrative of demographic decline, which is very popular in far-right Western discourse. And even though, of course, this document can't explicitly reference race, it uses cultural and civilizational language to basically mask the real truth behind this. And it's mad to think that once upon a time, this was a fringe Reddit 4chan theory on the fringes of our politics. And now Mr. Trump himself and his administration are popularizing it across the world. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think so for people that aren't aware, like this national security strategy is something that's published by the US State Department to basically give their outlook on international relations as they see it. And obviously, when we were fully immersed in the era of US hegemony, or Pax Americana, let's call it, it was very much, we're going to be the guiding light. This is how we see it. We're going to steer the course. It's just so important for everyone to be democracies. And if you've got oil, then we'll bring you democracy, etc., etc. And this represents a marked shift in how the US sees its place in the world and how it sees the development of, let's sort of Western coalition, very much aligning themselves with Western Asia and Gulf powers, very much aligning themselves with Russia, and also very uncritical of China, not framing China as this immediate imposing threat that needs to be neutralized, but in terms of that Trumpian realpolitik, someone that needs to be a trading partner. And the way I think about this national security strategy is, do you remember historically the deal that was struck with, and I forget the name evades me, between Spain and Portugal to basically split the world in two?
No. Tell me more about that.
So this was whenever in early conquistador times, it was like a deal struck between Spain and Portugal. There was going to be an Iberian-dominated world, and they were going to split it in two and just divide up the colonies between them. And this feels like a push towards that, which makes sense because as we get closer to like a dual power system of China and the US, I feel like Trump and Trumpian politics is getting ready to let's just start divvying that up now. Let's just start working out where our spheres of influence are. And maybe it'll be more multipolar than that, the incorporation of the Gulf states and Russia and these sorts of things. But let's start working that out now. And we don't like this idea of the EU being a block outside of that. We don't think the EU has enough sort of real mechanical material power to warrant us giving it that respect. And all those old liberal ideas we had of developing norms and international policy and international governmental organizations, let's forget about that. Whoever's got the guns will talk to you and give you respect. If you don't, then forget about it.
It's really fascinating because you say it's old liberal ideas, but really we're just starting to creep out.
10 years ago, whatever you want to call it.
But that's what I mean, right? Because at the turn of the sort of like at the turn of 2000s, what we saw was this narrative around how we've reached the end of history, right? Liberalism is our sort of guiding light, and therefore that we've reached the kind of ultimate way of sort of civilizational structure. But then over time, what you see, especially in the literature reflects this as well, is that the rise of hybrid regimes again, and actually like democracies start kind of doing a bit of backsliding and turning into some sort of half hybrid authoritarian, half kind of on the surface level of it, democratic regimes. And I think a lot of people I think a lot of people who have been indoctrinated by this kind of mainstream liberal canon of understanding the world are really surprised and shocked about all of this that's happening. But all this really shows us is that even if you kind of take it back to first principles, human nature has always really been the same. And maybe technology has kind of like, dispersed an illusion over us that actually we've had real progress over time, but that material progress can't actually be conflated with intellectual progress. Rather, actually, that we as human beings still and always have lived in the era of strong men, and the kind of warlords of the past and the big strong kind of leaders of the past. It's not something of the past. It's not a figment of history, but rather it exists in the present. And I think someone like Trump, in a very, I guess, paradoxical way, has really ripped the mask off the liberal paradigm.
Yeah, the agreement was and this is the benefit of being online, the Treaty of Tordesillas, 1494. I want to say as well that when you talk about that liberal order that we had, when we say liberal order, we mean the people that think that you can start to have rules and regulations around how international how the international sphere is conducted, and those can exert some level of autonomous power. So we're looking at the UN, we're looking at NATO, we're looking at these sorts of things. We're looking at international diplomacy. I think a lot of the countries, especially the smaller countries, namely Great Britain, that bought into that idea wholeheartedly under the umbrella of US power, have sort of been hoisted by their own petard, in the sense that they fully bought into these ideas of globalization and specialization of labor in different countries, such that as Trump starts to turn the dial back towards, how autonomously powerful are you, Britain's realizing we can't even deter nuclear weapons on our own. Like, our Trident defense mechanism doesn't work without US aid. We are literally a financial services hub which could be removed at any second and have no sort of material capacity to defend ourselves if it came to that. And when we look at the EU is probably 4 to 5 years away from being able to defend itself as a land war against Russia. So it's just all based around sort of the recessing ideas of liberal order is what protects us, when in fact, if at any point it was going to get cracking, we are far from ready to defend ourselves.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's I think it is obviously, like, to some extent it's like it's scary, sure, right? Because people are kind of worried about civilizational collapse, and we have the climate crisis as well on the horizon, and so it feels as if like this kind of
Climate crisis is always on the horizon.
well, it's you keep saying that until it's just going to happen, right?
That's facts.
And again, what I'm quite sort of interested in is that we've been really sold a lie in the last kind of couple of decades that things have been progressing, right? But actually, with the rapid acceleration of a lot of these things, whether it's technology, whether it's sort of wealth building, whatever, rapid acceleration is always associated with the downward trajectory. It's never associated really with the upward trajectory. And I think that only now are we starting to kind of see that come true. And also on top of that, I always just kind of think back to the words of like Malcolm X and his depiction of these kind of leaders about whether are you really a wolf or are you just basically a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I think for a long time we were just used to wolves in sheep's clothing, really and truly. But now we are really in the era of the wolves, and Donald Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping, and whoever. And even the kind of appetite for wolves, right? Nigel Farage and his rise shows us that we're moving into a different era of politics.
If Putin and them man come Enfield, what are you on?
Well, I'm in Canada, so I don't know about Enfield.
But
I don't know what Enfield is.
Let me give you a couple hypotheticals. If there was a land war in Europe, let's say like I don't know, Putin and them man invade like Belarus or something, and then let's say they get to the doors of Poland, and like Keir Starmer says, "Nah, Sean, you need to rise up." What are you saying?
I'm not rolling, bro. You must be mad.
You're not rolling?
I'd only roll, if like it was like a sort, like within my sort of social ethic or social justice framework, I thought it was worth it.
When you say social framework, do you mean like if the man them are rolling as well? You're like, if you man do it, I'll do it.
Bro, if you're there, I'm doing it. Well,
that's what I'm trying to say. People think about like we're not going solo. Like, you're gonna be with like the boys. Like, I'm gonna be with the man from Tower Hamlets.
The tent giving strategy. You can be on the front line.
You're on that. What's that poem? There go the 500. The charge of the light brigade and thing. Now, it's something to think about though. Like, I feel like
I'm too pretty to fight, man. I'm too pretty.
Look at these TikTok comments getting to your head. I think if Putin and them man want to come like Roman Road, like Tower Hamlets sides, Whitechapel, then cool. I'll be on Whitechapel Road defending the ends. But as far as going, as well, it's a shame we live in Britain, because just correlation wise, it's like probability that Britain is on the right side of the war has just consistently been proven wrong. So I want to like, if Britain went to war, I'd want to get that like national spirit and be like, yeah, we're on it. But it's like, probability wise, you're probably in the wrong.
But I also don't think that's going to happen as well.
Is it? We're gonna do end of year predictions in a couple of weeks here, but you don't think?
No,
I think it's gonna get cracking.
I think it's because one of the I think everyone's addicted to material comforts. And so, like, even though that there's been a rise of like nuclear weapons and there's a rise of sort of like, I guess, perceived anger and aggression, ultimately, I don't think we're actually going to head to some sort of like nuclear war, civilizational destruction, only because a lot of these kind of decision makers and these wolves are men of this world. They don't believe in a world after, right? And therefore they're not going to be willing to take it there. Maybe they will for like, and in a very sort of
What about your lot though?
Don't worry about my lot, innit?
No, I'm worried about your lot.
My lot has shown there's a world to
these are not men of this world.
No, but I think, look, there can be some sort of aggression, and we will see some more wars, but like a global war, really? I think actually the fact that because we have paradoxically, because we have nuclear weapons, it means that we know that like the push of that button can
But
trigger it, and just like that.
but
So
the
I don't
logical
think that
implication of
happens.
what you're saying, that a lot of the people that have nuclear weapons are men of this world, so we shouldn't worry about them killing this world. So what I take from that is that we should prevent at all costs any sort of Islamic state or Muslim state getting their hands on nuclear weapons.
Well, no, I think it's the fact that it's a safeguard having all these nuclear weapons.
But you're saying because it's men of this world, it's sort of like pseudo atheistic Christianity.
Oh, okay. We're not pseudo atheists, but I know what you mean. Like a sort of, okay, I know what you mean. So
If we got a real like sort of God fearing Muslim leader with like nukes in his back pocket, you think that's a problem?
yeah, probably.
Fair. You heard
Like,
you heard it from you didn't hear that from me. You heard that from Sean Rameez.
no. As in, bro, any more nuclear weapons will be a problem. Full stop. Anyways, but I mean, I've been very critical. Like Islam, there's certain tendencies, certain strands that are very kind of like against radical. So I
Yeah,
definitely
no,
don't want them to have nuclear weapons.
but I mean, obviously I'm scared in it because from what Benjamin Netanyahu said, I think Iran are about a week away from developing nuclear weapons. So, but we'll leave it there for the state of play today, and we'll get into a brief but banterful echo chamber. We'll talk about the state of political commentary. Okay, into the echo chamber. And during this winter season, when you're snowed in with the boys, we're going to use the echo chamber to talk a bit more about just things we care about. Show a bit more personality. I don't feel like we show enough personality sometimes.
No, you're just still having that trauma from your first episode, or when all the man them were like, "Rah, what's going on? Bro? What's happening here? Who's this
But
guy?"
I feel like we've come a long way, don't it?
100%. Alhamdulillah, innit? Gotta be grateful.
And I think as well, like when it comes to podcasting, being on camera and that sort of stuff, you do freeze up a little bit. And I notice myself not really being my real self on camera naturally.
Nah, I think you're being a bit self-critical, but I do understand. Like, of course,
Yeah,
like
as in,
it's
we're growing into it week on
Yeah.
week, and sometimes there's episodes of me and Sean afterwards will be like, yeah, proper, that was good, and other times there'll be episodes where afterwards we're just walking home in silence, thinking like, not sure.
I'm just gassed people can't see me in 4K today. I like the 1080p, the low res, because in 4K, see all my spots and my wrinkles. Gosh.
But it came to my mind this week. I was thinking it would be good for us to discuss how we think about political commentary, what we think about it when it comes to Northstar, and how we think about the current state of UK political commentary. And I think when it comes to the Northstar mission, obviously push political imagination, but our main goal has always been to animate the inanimate. I love a good phrase, a little bit of chiasmus, bit of a parallelism there. And what I mean by that, animate coming from the Latin animus, literally describes spirit, adding spirit to things which otherwise seem despirited. And a lot of political commentary in the UK is designed around trying to make what people traditionally perceive as politics entertaining. So you see people like Politics Joe doing reactions to PMQs or loads of discussions and interviews outside Parliament and Sunday politics and trying to make something cool about politics and the third. But our thing was, we're kids who have grown up thinking that politics is abundantly interesting, but not because of any of that stuff. Because we think politics is actually so much more real, tangible, and intimate than anyone else gives it credit for. So when we talk about football, when we talk about music, when we talk about day-to-day life, when we talk about food, there's all political. There's all political aspects of this. So in fact, the task becomes a lot simpler. Rather than trying to animate something that is boring and just kind of stale, obviously there's some utility to that, and there's some interesting parts of that, and there's some important parts of that. We're actually just trying to pick apart what we see to be a really spirited thing in its essence and try and show people that that is political. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting because all great endeavors start when you think you can do something better than the people who are currently doing it. And if I'm being very honest, there's no one in the kind of political media space that I actually kind of really look up to. I quite like Navarra and individuals from
Yeah.
Navarra, but even, and I think to be honest, like, they did set the path for a lot of kind of left-wing commentary, etc. But even the kind of branding and the bucketing into left wing, right wing, like me and Noah always have a thing where it's like, tell me what your political beliefs are. And if you tell me I'm a left wing or right winger, I'll be like, you didn't tell me what your political beliefs are. Because
Literally.
it literally means like nothing, right? Especially as we are starting to see in this kind of modern world, as we kind of recently just spoke about on the pod, about how the traditional paradigms of belief are kind of breaking down before us. I think one of the goals we have in particular is we're on the left in the sense that our politics is always about elevating the condition of the most vulnerable, the poorest in society, etc., because everyone has a right to have a good standard of living, a good standard of life. But equally, we're not wanting to fall into the kind of, I guess, the pitfalls of quote unquote wokeism, which I think and I define as not being able to entertain or discuss opposing ideas, no matter how kind of like problematic they may be. And so this is why, like, you guys at home, your feedback's really useful and really helpful, and actually you getting involved as well, that's the most important part, because we want to make it very dynamic and like a back and forth process.
Yeah, and we're looking for routes to do that in the new year. Obviously, this first little run of episodes we've done has been very much, me and Sean just pushing it. But in the new year, we've got a lot of stuff planned. There'll be a bit more interactive. There'll be some live streams. There'll be interviews. There'll be all that kind of stuff. But I think as well, when I look at the state of political commentary in the UK, it is severely lacking. One thing that we always try to remind ourselves is you've got to be entertaining. Yeah. You actually have to, like, as much people think, like, a lot of time, we talk about this with SIBO when we talked about the hibbity skibbity wibbity rappers who are talking that, like, mythical math, yeah? They're talking that mythical math, yeah? And they're thinking, why are people not listening? This is so important. Like, why are people not listening to my, like, Black Israelite speech on why Yaqub, like, split the steel and made white people in the Caucasian mountains? But it's like, bro, you actually got to remember, you got to be entertaining first. Yeah. And you see this sometimes as a pervasive problem for sports, and you saw Michael Johnson try and solve this with his track running league. It's like, it's objectively impressive and sick what these sprinters are doing, but you actually have to make it entertaining.
Yeah, but I think entertaining as well, it can't come at the trade-off of authenticity.
Precisely. And you see sometimes people make that trade-off too much, and then it's like we end up watching like Backchat or Shade Borough.
Yeah, and also I think just to highlight something that you said as well is like this politics thing, guys, is not mainstream Westminster. It's the world around you. Like, Noah, let me ask you just a fundamental question. Like, why are you interested in politics? We haven't even answered that before, but why?
It's interesting because I think that question itself is loaded, because it's not like I'm actually interested in politics. I just am political.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
But unpack that then. So,
it's basically,
put it this way then. Why did you pursue the study of politics then? Right.
It's weird because, like, before I was even cognitively aware that politics was an academic field, which it isn't. Like, the academic field of politics is just a subsection of sort of academia rather than being like the whole encompassing nature of politics. Is me just realizing that I'm just political, that we all are just political. So even, back in the day when you saw the videos of me asking Boris Johnson questions, I wasn't thinking to myself.
Not asking, smoking.
Yeah, smoking him. I wasn't thinking to myself, let me step out of my private sphere and now become a political agent when I attend this discussion, this debate. It's like, no, like, I got questions for you. Like, I'm just walking around my borough, my area, seeing bare poverty, but at the same time, I'm seeing Canary Wharf and bare like glass buildings and stuff. Like, Boris, like, what's going on there? Yeah. That's just simple. It's not me thinking is something I'm doing political and then coming out of it. Even when I was younger, I used to go up all the time to my family's from Manchester. I used to go up all the time to watch Man United games, and I'd be there at protests where fans are protesting the ownership of the Glazers, who took over the club with a leveraged buyout and then used all the debt, put the debt on the club to then have the club pay it off. And I remember being in the protest with my dad, and like, people are there, thousands of people there, and like, horses are charging us and stuff like this. It's like, people would look at this as not political. This is very political. Because remember, this leveraged buyout happened in the run up to the 2008 financial crash. Yeah. These were the kind of things that caused that.
And not to steal a phrase from our good friend Basayo Twins, but it's because everything is political, right?
Facts. Shout out Basayo.
And even like, I think why I got involved in all of this in the first place and why I was bothered to make Talk to Cameras, etc., is quite literally because ever since I was younger, I realized that the world around you is structured by people making decisions. Like, the way you interact with the world, the reason why you can't even like pass, I don't know, across a fence, for example, someone like, made the decision to put up the fence in the first place. And so like, your entire existence, right, is basically structured and in relation to decisions made around you. And so like, if you care about your life and if you care about the things that go on around you, as you should, because you're someone who exists by definition, then the study of politics is really just that. I feel like it's just the study of the world. And I think hopefully as we try and break things down, and that's why we want to take more of a community approach with this. Like, we're cool. It's really good to get some big names on the pod, but like, we prefer people who are just like really tapped into the community, understand the people around them to actually get their wisdom and insights. Is because this is what pushing political imagination is about, right? We're pushing the imagination beyond the spheres of Westminster, beyond the spheres of left wing, right wing, Labour, etc. Just to make sure that people can really just see the world around them in a different way, to be honest.
Facts. I think we'll leave it there for today. I want to say, anyone who's made it this far, shout out you, real star.
I know, the fact that you just watched us yap on this like badly like produced quality, but yeah.
But yeah, like I say, the next few episodes are going to be a bit more personal. So next week we'll actually be doing a bit of a Q&A. So we're going to put out a call for questions on our socials, but also under the Spotify, if you've got questions, send it in. Or you can just jump ahead of it and DM us on Instagram, Northstar Politics on every platform to get in contact. Nothing too mad. Like, we'll answer most questions, but like, come on now, isn't it? Like, babe.
No, are you single? That's my question.
Bro. Me, I'm a well, yeah. Yeah, I am.
See him.
But it's like loud kind of questions, isn't it? But yeah, we'll leave it there for this week. Anything people should be looking out for over the next week, Sean, before we're back with them?
Nothing in particular from my side. I mean, if you follow my personal, you just see some nice snowy images of Canada. So if you want that, then sure, follow my personal. But other than that, I think this is a bit of a rest, relaxation for us to recharge for the new year. Because again, 2026, it's going to be big.
Come on. All right, stars. Then we'll see you next week.